Okay, we're starting a new parak in Tanya, which is a very, very interesting fundamental parak of Tanya. So starting chapter 42, on the top it's page Nun Tes, on the bottom it's page 218. Okay? In the previous chapter 41, Alter Rebbe explained the very great importance of yira, of fear. Even if it's the natural instinctive fear, it's still enough to get a person to have this humility and bittul and subjugation to Hashem, and that's the beginning of Aveda. So he says like this, and he says really at the end that every Jew has this as an inheritance, but we need to reveal it, bring it out into the open. Okay, so now he says like this, based on what we explained before, concerning the lower level of fear, Yuv and Hated will understand properly the Gemara, what the Gemara says. On the pasuk, a pasuk we read last week's Shabbat, last week's Torah portion. And pasuk says like this: "Ata Yisrael, now Jews, Ma Hashem Elokecha shel me'imach kiyim liyira." The pasuk says in Parshas Eikev, listen, Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jews, and he says, "Ata Yisrael, now Jews, listen. What does God want from you? The only thing He wants you to do is to fear Him." Okay, that's what the pasuk says. So the Gemara in Brachas asks, "Atu yira Moses utasahi? Is fear such an easy thing?" I mean, the pasuk seems to imply, "Hey, what does He want already? He wants you only to fear God." You know what fear God means? Fear God means you don't do anything wrong because you picture God constantly watching you. You know, like a policeman constantly watching you, you're not going to go rob a bank. So what does it mean? The Gemara asks, how could it be? And the Gemara answers a very strange answer. The Gemara answers in Brachas, yes, the Gabi Moshe Milsa Zutrasihi. For Moshe Rabbeinu, it's easy. That's what the Gemara answers. Yeah, for Moshe Rabbeinu, it's easy. So he says, it's not understood. The Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jews, and Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jews, what does God want from you already? He's talking to the Jewish people. Okay? In other words, simply the Gemara means, yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jews, and Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, yeah, for me it's an easy thing. What does He want? He wants you to fear God. Like, for me it's easy. But Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jews, and he says, what does God want from you? He didn't say what God wants from me. So the question is, Alter Rebbe is asking on the Gemara, how could the Gemara say that fear is an easy thing that the Torah is demanding from every single Jew? Because for Moshe Rabbeinu, it's easy. But He's asking from every Jew. Elohim, he says like this, it's a remarkable concept here. The Inyan is Ki kol nefesh v'nefesh mi beis Yisrael, every single soul of every Jewish man, woman, and child. Yesh bo mebchinas Moshe Rabbeinu olav v'shalom, has a level of Moshe Rabbeinu in them. Every single Jew has a Moshe Rabbeinu within them. Why? He is one of the 7 shepherds. The Gemara says there's 7 shepherds and there's Shmein and the Nesichei Adam, 7 anointed ones. But let's not get into the anointed ones. The Gemara says there's 7 Shiva Rayim. There's 7 shepherds. Who were they? The 7 Ushpizim that we say on Sukkot, by the way. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. These were the 7 shepherds, the Gemara says. Now, what does it mean when the Gemara says they are shepherds? What type of expression? What does it mean? So when the Torah speaks, like we learned, the Torah says the hand of God, the foot of God. It's metaphors for something that in order for us to be able to understand it. What does a shepherd do? The role of a shepherd is to take care of the flock. What does he do primarily? He takes the sheep or whatever, the cattle, to graze. A shepherd is one that makes sure the animals eat. Now, what does it mean, the Shiva Reim? Avraham was Chesed, and Yitzchak is Gvura, and Yaakov is Teferes, and Moshe Rabbeinu is Das, various different levels. I'm not getting into all of them now. He's talking here about Moshe Rabbeinu. A shepherd is the definition, one who internalizes that level of godliness that the neshama has, but it's superficial. And the job of a shepherd is to feed the flock, meaning to internalize that level, which is superficial. And I'll explain exactly what this means now, to internalize it. Now let's speak with something that Rebbe explains a lot in the Maimer Vata Tetzaveh, and it's a lot of it has to do with what Alter Rebbe is saying here also. The Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu, his function was to be Mamshech Das. There's Chochmah, Bina, and Das, which is similar to the concept of Emunah, of belief in Hashem. The Gemara says, Yisrael Maminim B'nei Maminim. The Jews are believers, the children of believers. Every Jew believes in God. I mentioned many times, somebody once came to the Rebbe by dollars or whatever it was, and said, Rebbe, I don't believe in God. And Rebbe said to him, the fact that you say you don't believe in God doesn't take away from the fact that you do believe in God, because the Gemara says every Jew is a believer. But you have sometimes, the Gemara says, also in Brachas, a strange Gemara. We mentioned in the past. The Gemara says, Ganva apum machtarta rachamona karya. A thief, when he's about to break into a home to rob, he davens tash. Rachmana Kari means he's calling Rachmana, he's calling Hashem. He's davening to Hashem to be successful. What's the Gemara telling us? The Gemara telling us a funny joke. The Gemara says a statement. Aganath, he's about a thief. He's about to break into somebody's house. He's davening to Hashem to be successful. The Gemara is saying here an unbelievable one-liner that brings out a fundamental aspect in Yiddishkeit. And that is, this thief obviously believes in God. If he wouldn't believe in Hashem, why in the world would he be davening to Hashem? He's not going to daven to Hashem if he doesn't believe in him. So he's like this. He's davening to Hashem because he believes in Hashem. And he knows he's stealing discreetly because he knows you're not allowed to steal. Why isn't that contradictory? Why isn't that being a hypocrite? He believes in God, and he knows Hashem doesn't want him to steal, and he's doing it anyway. And not only that, he's davening to Hashem to be successful in something he knows Hashem doesn't want him to do. What the Gemara is teaching us, Chassidus says, is every Jew believes. But the emunah is superficial. What does superficial mean? It doesn't affect him directly. It only affects him indirectly. What does that mean? It affects him indirectly. He's davening to Hashem. Why? Because he believes. But that's not affecting his behavior. Why doesn't it affect his behavior? Because the emunah is not internalized. The emunah is superficial. It's only affecting him, generally speaking, I'm going to pray to God. But his actions and not permeated by that emunah. What is the job of Moshe Rabbeinu? Now that I was saying, going to say over here, Moshe Rabbeinu was called Raya Mehemna. There were 7 shepherds, we said. The 7 Ushpizim, even though the order is a little bit different than the Ushpizim. There's Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. 7 great people. But from all of them, Moshe Rabbeinu is called Raya Mehemna. In Zohar, it's Zohar language. Raya Mehemna means simply a faithful shepherd. Moshe Rabbeinu called a faithful shepherd. Chassidus comes along and explains Raya Mehemna doesn't mean a faithful shepherd only. It means the shepherd of faith. Not a faithful shepherd. Moshe Rabbeinu is a shepherd of faith. What does that mean? He feeds the Jews emunah. He's a shepherd. He feeds the Jews emunah. What does it mean he feeds emunah? If you put food on your stomach, you're not going to get full. Right? We all know that. In order to get full, you need to chew it and digest it, and then the food goes all over the body in the blood. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu is that level, and the Alter Rebbe is saying over here, this exists within every single Jew. But first, Alter Rebbe is discussing Moshe Rabbeinu, and then we'll see how it applies to every single Jew. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that feeds emunah, feeds das. Das means not understanding. Das, the Alter Rebbe explained before in the 3rd chapter of Tanya, and many places since then. Das means binding, connection, and feeling. Moshe Rabbeinu's role as a Moshe Rabbeinu was to feed, feeling das, and emunah to the Jew. And that's why it says in last week's parsha, also we say 3 times a day in Shema. Okay? In Parshat Volume Shemaya, which we read last week's parsha, Parsha Seker, it says, "V'nasati esav v'sotcha levehemtecha v'yachalta b'savot." Moshe Rabbeinu says, "I am going to give grass in the fields for your animals, and you will eat and be full." So the obvious question is, Moshe Rabbeinu, Chumash Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking. It's not Hashem speaking through Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu says the whole book of Devarim. So the question is, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I am giving grass in the fields for your animals to eat. So the question, Moshe Rabbeinu gives grass? Hashem gives grass. So the answer is, Shechina medaberes mitech gereine shel Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was only God's microphone. The Shechina speaks through the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. So when Moshe Rabbeinu says, I am giving grass in the fields for your animals, it's not me, Moshe Rabbeinu. It's Moshe Rabbeinu's Hashem speaking through Moshe Rabbeinu, like the microphone. So Chassidus explains, what does it mean though? Chassidus explains a remarkable thing. I'm going to go off because such fundamental things about a Rebbe. There's a nefesh olakis and a nefesh habahamis. We have within us a godly soul, which is called man. And we have an animal soul, which is called behema, an animal. It wants to eat and drink and sleep and have a good time. It's an animal. It's animalistic temptation. What's the difference between Adam and behema? So the Gemara says, Adam yesh bei das. A person has das. Behema ein lo das. A behema has no das. That's why the first bracha after the initial 3 of the Shemona Esrei is Ata chenen la Adam das. that God, you grant to mankind das. Why is that the first bracha? Because that's the uniqueness of man, that we have das and Behemoth doesn't have das. So the Nefesh Shulikis has das, understanding of feeling of godliness. It's a part of God. And the Nefesh Habamis, the animal soul, doesn't. It's a Behemoth. Behemoth doesn't have das. So Chassidus explains, and the Alter Rebbe alludes to it here also. What does it mean when Moshe Rabbeinu says, "V'nasati Esav b'sotcha"? In Kabbalistically, Esav is ayin shin beis. So you have ab, and the shin, it represents the level of das. Okay, just trust me, I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's what it means. Esav is das. Moshe Rabbeinu says in Krishna, not about the physical grass in the field. That also is true. But in a deeper meaning, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I am giving das, Esav, das, b'sadcha livehemtecha, to your nefesh abahamis. I am feeding it. The godly soul doesn't need it. Godly soul has it. What's the problem with us? The animal soul. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I am giving das, feeling of godliness. In the field, livehem techa, for your animal, for your nefesh abahamis. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm internalizing this level of das, the level of feeling godliness, in amunah, belief in God, faith in Hashem, the achalta v'savata, that you should eat it. You should digest the amunah, digest the das. That is the function of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, the Rebbe is saying now that every single Jew, basically the Gemara says, has this level of Moshe Rabbeinu in them. And for that level of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is within every single Jew, it's very easy because we have it. We have Moshe Rabbeinu. We have that level of das within it. We have this level of yira. We have this innate, inborn, natural, instinctive love and fear of Hashem. But we need to eat it. We need to internalize it. We need to reveal it. And therefore, when the Gemara says, for Moshe Rabbeinu, fear of Hashem is easy, the Alter Rebbe is answering his own question. How do you mean? It's not the Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah is speaking to us. The Torah says every Jew has a Moshe Rabbeinu within them. That's what the Gemara is saying. For Moshe, it's easy. Are you speaking to every single Jew? So the obvious answer is every Jew has a Moshe Rabbeinu. In different places, not for now. Every Jew has Mashiach in them. And the Rebbe proves it also. There's some places in Parshas Balak when it says like Dorach Teichav Miyakov, the stars shot out of Yaakov. One place it says it refers to every single Jew. Another place it says it refers to Mashiach. So which one is it? So the Rebbe explains that both are true. Every Jew has a Mashiach within them. Just like every Jew has a Mashiach, a Moshe Rabbeinu within them, every Jew has a Mashiach within them. So now let's go back inside. Therefore, they're called shepherds, because what is their function? Feeding the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu, who klolos kulam, Moshe Rabbeinu is the general one of them, the sum of them all. Like we said, he's called, simply means faithful shepherd. But in a deeper sense, it means the shepherd of faith. He feeds faith. He feeds emunah. He feeds das, feeling elokus. Hainu shemam shech b'chinas hadas. Moshe Rabbeinu, who personified the level of das, of feeling godliness, he brings that level of das down, the chlolis Yisrael, to every single Jew, laid as Hashem, to know Hashem, meaning to feel Hashem. Kol echad ve'echad, kol echad k'fi hasagas nishmasi, based on the human ability of understanding that the neshama has. The sharsha lamaila based on the source of the neshama upstairs, because there are people that have greater neshamas, and there are people that have lower neshamas. There are people that have better understanding, people that have not as good understanding. Moshe Rabbeinu's role is to bring down the level of das to every single Jew based on the level of that particular Jew, based on his ability to understand and based on his level of neshama. Because the definition of a Rebbe is like it says when Moshe Rabbeinu told Hashem, after Hashem told him a few weeks ago in Parshas Chukah, when Hashem said to him, okay, go look at the land because you're dying. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, get a leader. Yasha Yeti Lefnem, Asher Yavel Lefnem is going to lead them. So Hashem told him, okay, good point. Take your Yeshua. Ish Asher Ruach Bai, a man that has a spirit in him. And the Gemara says, what does it mean? The Medrash says, Shayahelech keneged ruchei shokol echad ve'echad. Who is Yeshua? What is a Rebbe? One who goes according to the level of every single Jew. What's good for you is not good for him necessarily. What's good for him is not necessarily good for her. Who knows that? A Rebbe. That's what he's saying here in Tanya. The Medrash says it by Yeshua. Yeshua understood the level of every single Jew, and he brought down that level of godliness, which is pertinent and relevant to that particular Jew. That's the infinite greatness of a Rebbe. He looks at a person, he knows what the level is for that Jew, not for another Jew. What's good for you, not for him. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu does. He says he brings down the level of das. He internalizes, he feeds das. He internalizes the level of das within every single Jew, that every single Jew can have this feeling, das, feeling of godliness. And he says, V'nikasa, and the nourishment of every single Jew, which comes Misherish Nishmas Moshe Rabbeinu, from the source of Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the first Rebbe. A Rebbe is, like we said, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people. The head is the nerve center. The nerve center feels any part of the body. When there's a pain in the ingrown toenail, the head feels it, not the foot. The head feels the pain of every single part of the body. And that's what a Rebbe does. The Sharshalamai, and it comes to Mushreshes, which the source of Moshe Rabbeinu is the Dasa Elyon in the level of Dasa Batzilis, Shebiyutzvir Satzilis, Hamari Yuchedes B'Matzilan Baruch, that is one with Hashem himself. Shuvadaite Echad, and him, and that knowledge is one, the knower, the knowing, and it's all one. But the Alter Rebbe is saying over here is basically that Moshe Rabbeinu brings down this level of godliness to every single Jew. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore, every Jew that has the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu within them, okay, is, and as the Rebbe points out, an interesting thing. The Rebbe points out that he's saying here the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu. There's a difference between a revelation and a spark. A revelation is the sun shines light. Okay, it shines light, but it's not fire. A spark is part of the essence of the fire. When you have a fire, it gives light. Okay, but the light it gives is not actually part of the flame. it's a revelation of the flame. It's an emanation of the flame. A spark of the flame is the actual flame. And he says, Moshe Rabbeinu brings down the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu, the spark, not the emanation, the revelation. He brings down the spark of fire to every single Jew. And he says, yeah. And then he says even more. We'll just start this now. Yes, it al Cain, and even not only that Moshe Rabbeinu does it, but he says there's a Moshe Rabbeinu that comes into every generation. The whole Darvada, and this is what he says, the word nitzutzin. In every generation, Jordan nitzutzin. Nitzutzin are sparks of Moshe Rabbeinu. Remember, light gives off light, but it's not the fire. I mean, fire gives light, but it's not the fire. The spark of the fire, meaning the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu, is not a revelation of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's the spark which is part of Moshe Rabbeinu's fire. Come minishras Moshe Rabbeinu, from the neshama Moshe Rabbeinu, umislabshim beguf v'nefesh shel chachmei hader, and the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu in Tikkun Zohar, which is a part of the Zohar. It says, "Is pashtusa the Moshe b'chol dara v'dar." The Rabbi used to quote this a lot. There is a manifestation of Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. In Tikkun Zohar, it says, in the generation of Mashiach, it's the actual Moshe Rabbeinu, not a manifestation of Moshe Rabbeinu, an emanation of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's the actual Moshe Rabbeinu. Umislabshim beguf v'nefesh, and this spark of Moshe Rabbeinu comes down into a body and the soul. The body also, and the Rebbe points out, the Rebbe says guf v'nefesh, that this spark comes into the body and soul of Moshe, of the leader of the generation. Why didn't the Rebbe say the neshama and the body? He said, because then I would think the body doesn't have it like the neshama does. The Rebbe is saying, beguf v'nefesh shel chachmei hador, meaning the body of the tzaddik, of a Rebbe, in every generation, the body has the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu. L'lamei das Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. What is their role? What's the primary role of a Rebbe? To feed Jews das, to feed Jews emunah. Leida l'lamed das to teach das, feel, not knowledge, feeling of godliness. V'leida gedulas Hashem, and to know the greatness of Hashem, to understand it, feel it, or la'avdei b'leiv nefesh, and to serve God with all your heart and soul. That is the role of Moshe Rabbeinu. But Lepreil, the Alter Rebbe says, every Jew has this Moshe Rabbeinu within them. This spark that teaches Jews, that feeds Jews emunah and das, every single Jew has that. But in every generation, the Rebbe of the generation is one that openly reveals it within the Jew. Every Jew has it. And for that level of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's easy to fear God, like the Gemara says. But who reveals it within the Jew? That's the Rebbe of every generation. Moshe Rabbeinu of every generation actually reveals that level. Okay, to be continued, we're going to stop here. Everybody, don't forget, this week is Shabbos and Mevorachim Elul. The Shchedesh is Monday and Tuesday.